Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the weekly immigration news recap, where we break down what changed in U.S. immigration this week, actually the last 2 weeks, because we skipped last week, and what signals came from the Trump administration that could impact your immigration situation if you're a foreign national, or your client strategy if you're an immigration practitioner. Today is Friday, October 3rd. It's about 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're recording this one a little bit late, but it's going to be released in just a couple of hours here in the afternoon. To cover all the immigration news with me this week, I'm really lucky to be joined by my friend Sam Peak. He is the Labor and Mobility Policy Manager at the Economic Innovation Group, which is a bipartisan think tank dedicated to forging a more dynamic and inclusive American economy. Sam, you're actually my first ever return guest to the show, so welcome back, and thanks for coming back. For folks who maybe missed our first episode and didn't get to hear your intro, then can you tell them a little bit more about you and your work at EIG?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. It's an honor to be back and set a new precedent. I am as you said, I'm the Labor and Mobility Policy Manager at Economic Innovation Group. We focus a lot on place-based policy and economic dynamism. How do we make America more entrepreneurial, and how do we have more people share in that entrepreneurship and the prosperity from that entrepreneurship? We believe that immigration is a very key component to that. It's an essential component to that. And I'm here, you know, communicating the common sense of one of America's most polarizing issue, busting myths, proposing sensible solutions, and we are playing the long game right now.
Yeah, yeah, and you've been now in this space through this is the second Trump administration you've been involved in immigration policy for, and then obviously the Biden administration as well. So a lot of big swings in that time period for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah. All right. So Sam and I, normally if you listen to this podcast, we go through quite a few news items. Since we missed last week, there's clearly a lot to catch up on. So Sam and I are going to focus mainly on the 100K H-1B fee today. We're also going to look at the new bipartisan H-1B and L-1 visa reform bill introduced in the Senate. We might spend a little bit of time on the Department of Labor's Project Firewall, which is aimed at ramping up audits, investigations, and other sort of enforcement actions on employers using the H-1B program, but maybe aren't in full compliance and therefore would receive penalties from the Department of Labor as a result. But lastly, again, I'm just going through the long list of things that happened in just the last couple of weeks here. We'll look at the weighted selection rule for the H-1B lottery and the gold card if we have time. But for any topic we don't do a deep dive on today, just be sure to subscribe to the podcast and my newsletter. I'll put it in the show notes because those are stories that we're going to look at with our unique perspective here at Lawfully, sharing data that hasn't been released before and insights from smart folks like Sam and also former USCIS leaders to give immigration practitioners new and valuable information to assess and strategize for all of this. So, Sam, with all of that, are you ready to jump into the news today?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Awesome. Well, I thought it would make sense to start with the big proclamation and press conference from a couple of weeks ago, because many times with the Trump administration, I think there are. Even though it may not seem so, there is a lot of information within the fine print of what top Trump administration officials say when they announce these immigration initiatives that maybe they don't know the ins and outs of. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, just play a minute or two of that press conference announcing the 100K H-1B fee, and then we'll get your reaction and talk about it a little bit more.
Okay, let's go.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the most abused visa systems in our current immigration system has been the H-1B non-immigrant visa program. This is supposed to allow highly skilled laborers who work in fields that Americans don't work in to come into the United States of America. What this proclamation will do is raise the fee that companies pay to sponsor H-1B applicants to $100,000. This will ensure that the people they're bringing in are actually very highly skilled and that they're not replaceable by American workers. So it'll protect American workers, but ensure that companies have a pathway to hire truly extraordinary people and bring them to the United States
We
to
need
work.
workers. We need workers. We need great workers. And this pretty much ensures that that's what's going to happen. I think, Sean, do you agree with that?
Well, they're $100,000 per year. So the whole idea is no more will these big tech companies or other big companies train foreign workers. They have to pay the government $100,000, then they have to pay the employee. So it's just not economic. If you're going to train somebody, you're going to train one of the recent graduates from one of the great universities across our land. Train Americans, stop bringing in people to take our jobs. That's the policy here. $100,000 a year for H-1B visas, and all of the big companies are on board. We've spoken to them about the gold card.
They love it. They love it. They really love it. They need it. Go ahead, Jim.
All right, I'll stop it there. Maybe the first thing that's worth calling out, Sam, and I'm going to share my screen with the great explainer that you and your colleague Connor O'Brien did as sort of a way to frame the conversation we're about to have. But obviously, the first thing that has been disproven since that announcement, I think fairly quickly, was that the 100K fee is not going to apply every single year for an individual H-1B. It's a one-time fee, right? That's correct.
Yep, that's correct. The idea that this is an annual fee, which would be very unrealistic, that has been proven false both by the USCIS announcements and the State Department announcement and the CBP announcement that followed the proclamation.
Yeah, and we'll show those in just a minute. But first, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you can see on the screen here an explainer from the Economic Innovation Group that Sam and his colleague Connor O'Brien did. We'll talk through this in a second. But first, Sam, I sort of want to talk about just the framing of the bill in the first, or excuse me, of the proclamation in the first place, right? Which I don't know if you know who that individual was who was handing President Trump the proclamation aside and sort of giving the spiel on what the proclamation was for. But the framing was very clear, right? In their view, the H-1B visa is the most, if one of the most, if not the most abused visa category. It takes away jobs from Americans, as Secretary Lutnick sort of doubled down on. And then lastly, apparently they talked with all the big tech companies and they love the 100K fee that they would need to pay in order to sponsor employees on an H-1B visa. So maybe like unpack all that. What did you take out of those comments when you first heard them?
Yeah, I admittedly forgot who that man teeing up Trump's announcement was, but he did run for I think governor or attorney general in my home state of Missouri and lost. So he's a familiar face. Kind of looks a little bit like Stephen Miller. I think
He did.
The resemblance. But my impression of this whole announcement was that Trump, based off of his comments, he thought businesses liked it. He thought we were bringing in, this would ensure that we're bringing in more workers. It's the exact opposite. As you can see, a $100,000 fee. If you attach a fee to anything, it's going to be a deterrent. It's going to deter people from using this program to bring in talent. People will find ways to either circumvent the H-1B program, circumvent the fee rule and get on H-1B, or if they can't do that, then they will just circumvent the United States and go to an office abroad instead, like in Canada and India, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and Secretary Lutnick sort of, framed this in his comments, and he expanded on it in some of the comments that we just won't take the time to show today, but people can go and watch the video. It's linked in the description of the podcast, about how, look, this 100K fee is going to ensure that if companies want to hire somebody on an H-1B, they're going to have to make a substantial additional, monetary investment in that person. In addition to the legal fees that they already pay and the government filing fees that they already pay in the first place to hire those individuals on an H-1B, on top of the salary that they're paid, right? And in their view, that's supposedly going to elevate the talent level of H-1B holders across the board if this, fee went into place over the course of a couple of years or so. I think, like you mentioned right there, is sort of the broad consensus, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the explainer that you and Connor did here. The broad consensus is that, like, the majority of companies are just not going to pay that fee. Financially, it just doesn't make sense for them to spend $100,000 to bring an employee to the U.S. when they could offshore them to Canada, hire them remotely in another country, keep them in their home country, whatever the alternatives are. But they're going to look to those first, most likely, before they look to paying this fee.
Yeah. And I think too the most important thing that we know right now that's important to keep in mind is that this fee is connected to travel ban authority. It's for people entering the United States, not for people who adjust their status from like a student visa or some other category and then switch to an H-1B while in the United States. So it makes more sense to think about this H-1B fee as a toll for entry in the United States for people on the H-1B. This is more of a toll, as we say in the explainer.
Can you break that down a little bit more? Because again, this is all moved quick enough that maybe I missed that update. So has one of the agencies or the White House press secretary clarified that if this rule were implemented in time for next year's H-1B cap, the 60, 70,000 individuals who get selected for the H-1B who are based in the United States at the time, when they changed their status on October 1st, 2026 to H-1B, they wouldn't owe the $100,000 fee, or is that still unclear?
They're being dodgy. They're not answering the question.
Yeah.
But if you look at the original White House proclamation, they cite what's called 212F, which is a travel ban authority. It's the exact same authority that they used to ban H-1Bs since during COVID, and they're banning H-1Bs with this travel ban authority, and they're saying that the exemption for this travel ban is if you pay $100,000 fee. So that's how this is constructed right now. Maybe we'll get more information and they will decide to apply it to people already in the United States somehow. But what we've seen so far, based off of the authority that they're using and based off of what USCIS officers at lower levels have been telling immigration lawyers, it does not apply to people within the United States.
Yeah.
That could change. This is an unpredictable administration, but that's what we know right now.
Yeah, let's maybe look at the little bit of information that we got out of the administration over the days following the announcement that we just watched. First, we got a very, very short policy memo from USCIS providing some clarification. I think you covered this in your explainer as well, Sam. But like you mentioned, this proclamation only applies, this is the bolded part for those who are just listening, the proclamation only applies prospectively to petitions that have not yet been filed. So if somebody has an H-1B overseas, right, and the visa is valid, they could presumably return to the U.S. and they don't owe this fee.
Yep.
As based off of what we know right now. And then that's sort of echoed by the State Department, again, sharing their official announcement here as well, right?
Yep. September 22nd. Anything filed after that, the fee would apply. If you're outside the United States, anything before that, you should be okay and grandfathered in.
Here's the big question that I know you touched on in the explainer. How do people pay the fee, Sam?
We don't know yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Venmo one of us. I'm just kidding. Don't. But
yeah, we're gonna get investigated by USCIS if we start proposing that. Yeah, who knows? Maybe they spin up another website like they did with the Trump card, and you just put your credit card information in there.
Maybe you will have to pay to the Department of Commerce. Anyone knows at this point. We're supposed to get some new guidance from USCIS, more about the fee later, and maybe that will include details on how to collect it.
Yeah. Emily Newman from Reddy Newman Brown, the immigration attorney who is very well known, has a big following on Twitter, mentioned that she had heard from an email with a individual at USCIS that in the coming days, this was yesterday, in the coming days, USCIS will provide more clarifying guidance on their website about the sort of the operations around this $100K fee. And Sam, if history serves us, I have a feeling we're going to get that at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, or sometime tomorrow, maybe 3 a.m. Saturday morning type of thing,
or in 2 months on a random Friday too, right? Like we don't.
Yeah, it's true. We don't. Okay, maybe before we move off of this, you and Connor in your piece sort of gave a broader background on the Trump administration's thinking behind putting this fee in place in the first place. Do you maybe want to like just editorialize a little bit more here on sort of how we got to this point where the Trump administration or President Trump himself and the Secretary of Commerce are sitting in the Oval Office making this proclamation?
Yeah, it cites a lot of flawed research. One being from the Economic Policy Institute, which is more skeptical of H-1B visas, essentially saying that H-1Bs are paid lower wages than their American counterparts. They don't control for age, and they look at what are called the level 1, level 2 workers, which are supposed to be entry-level workers. If you control for age and you control for other aspects, you find that similarly employed Americans with the same educational background within similar fields end up earning more than their H-1B counterparts, and that in general, the H-1B program is the opposite of cheap labor, both because the employer pays a penalty for hiring the H-1B worker in the form of fees, but also because the H-1B workers have higher wages than their American counterparts do.
There's been a real political shift. I don't think the H-1B for most of its existence over the last 35-ish years was thought of in a political way by either party. It was never really something that either party paid much attention to, quite frankly. But there is certainly been a shift, maybe starting in or early in the first Trump administration, but certainly now that we've been tracking on the podcast of major Republican lawmakers, individuals in the administration. Howard Lutnick was going on Laura Ingraham, it seemed like every other night in August and September, railing on the H-1B. Ron DeSantis, same thing. Prominent Republican voices, all of a sudden over the last couple of months, speaking publicly and critically. JD Vance as well in a podcast, a live show he did with the All In podcast, talking about it critically as well. And that just sort of swelled up into this policy proclamation. Whereas before, again, we don't need to get into the whole like history of political parties discussion, but the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and its corporate members, historically thought of as a more right-leaning organization, pro-business organization, was a huge proponent of the H-1B. They wrote a letter to the Secretary of Commerce, citing many of the things, Sam, that you've said thus far about how this will hurt businesses. This isn't actually going to have the intended effect that the administration thinks it's going, or says it might have, and that ultimately, like, businesses are going to lose out as a result. Innovation is going to lose out as a result of this fee. Based off of just what you were following over the last couple of months, why do you think this happened now? Like, why didn't this happen at the beginning of the Trump administration? Why didn't it happen a year from now? What was going on that made this a priority for the administration to do in the Oval Office 2 weeks ago?
This is speculation on my part. I want to just, I guess, give that caveat. But we saw the Hyundai raid and the administration expressing regret about the Hyundai raid, even asking the technicians to stay after being arrested and detained. All but one of them chose to remain in the U.S. and continue working on constructing the plants and getting that operational. The State Department apologized to Korean diplomats, and the Trump administration, I think Trump himself, wanted to give a symbolic nod towards high-skilled immigration. Some people who did not really agree with high-skilled immigration caught wind of that and approached him before anybody with agency expertise who would have been some moderating force could get involved. And so this is how we ended up with this very strange rollout of the fee rule in the first place, where you have somebody who is not affiliated at all with immigration, Howard Lutnick, explaining the rule, getting some key facts wrong, then retroactively, after waiting for a very long time, we get we get later in the night and over the weekend statements from USCIS and CBP, and then on Sunday we finally get something from the State Department itself, which would have primary authority for implementing the fee since this is a travel ban. And so the State Department was the last to comment on this. And so the way this was rolled out, I think it was a reflection of the conflicting priorities within the administration, within the different agencies on, do we want to admit high skilled immigrants versus let's let's clamp down on all immigration however we can. And then this is sort of the Frankenstein result of those things.
I'll join in your speculation because I think that's a informed and smart sort of analysis of what could have potentially happened. I have a slightly different view that I was sharing with you before we started recording, and I'll share again here because I wrote it in my newsletter yesterday. Of the other major immigration initiatives that were either announced or updated within the same couple of days as this proclamation. The Gold Card, Department of Labor's Project Firewall ramping up enforcement and audits on companies for H-1B compliance problems. And then the weighted selection rule for the H-1B lottery, which we'll talk about maybe at the end of the podcast here. I think that this rule and the confusion of the rollout maybe wasn't intended, but I think that there are people inside of the administration who aren't upset that all of the focus is on how confusing this fee and who it applies to, when it's going to apply, how people pay for it, all the unanswered questions that we still don't have really any clarification on. They're okay with that confusion because currently the weighted selection rule is in the public comment period. Certainly there are a lot of companies and individual applicants, especially F1 OPT holders who are going after entry-level jobs, startups, smaller employers who don't necessarily have the ability to pay higher fees in order to increase their employee selection odds in the H-1B lottery. All of those folks have concerns about this weighted lottery rule, but you and I were talking about this before, Sam, like the swell of media attention around this proclamation is, insane. Like every major news outlet, every major and minor news outlet, every podcast, that covers politics or YouTube show has been talking about this rule. And the other stories, aren't getting nearly as much coverage or attention, I think, from the media, from immigration lawyers, from individuals who are on H-1Bs, for example. And I think that is playing in favor of some of the individuals inside of the administration at lower levels who want to push through something like the weighted selection rule or ramp up, Project Firewall and enforcement measures on certain companies that are using the H-1B visa. So thoughts on my speculation, Sam?
Yeah, I think that there's merit to that. I mean, there are so many people involved in the administration that I think two things could be true at once even.
Yeah.
I think that sounds very plausible, and I agree that a lot of the focus has been on the fee and not on the rule. And right now, immigration lawyers have been more focused on the fee than on the weighted selection rule. That being said, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I think that these firms will be on the ball and they will be able to focus time on this rule and on the weighted selection rule and on the fee rule, and they will be coming with a fully staffed army against this weighted selection rule as well, in addition to the fee rule. And so I think that maybe I'm a little bit skeptical on how successful a diversionary tactic would be if that's the route they're going. But I think that's definitely, in the cards as to what has happened.
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's maybe before just final thing on this topic, and then we can talk about the weighted selection rule in a little bit more detail. But it's like it's very well known that there are already attempts underway to litigate against this 100K H-1B fee. Now, because there's so little, like there are so few details about what this fee actually is, right? And there's a lot of conflicting information. I imagine for the folks who are beginning to put a case together to litigate against it, it's like hard to sort of even follow what you're litigating against, right?
Yeah.
But how do you see this playing out, Sam? I'm not going to ask you for a hard prediction that I'm going to hold you to, but like maybe just a rough forecast of the timeline of events here over the next couple of months. Do you think we'll get some we'll get some clarification from the administration that will be concrete enough that interested parties will then put together a solid piece of litigation to try and stop or maybe not even fully stop, but let's say like decrease the fee, for example, from 100K, if that's the argument that they go with, versus like this fee is just completely, against the law. What do you think is going to happen?
I'm not sure. I think that there's a lot of possibilities. You had mentioned before that employers were, I think, reticent right now, as there aren't any details to find an angle on this and to challenge the admin on this. It could be employer driven. There were lawsuits previously on like the perm backlogs that, from my understanding, businesses weren't really the face of that as well. So maybe that would be a litigation route as well. I I'm not sure. It depends on what the details, the additional details that come out, because right now the Trump administration has ample authority to walk back this fee rule or to clamp down on this fee rule as they specify more details. We could find all sorts of industries and people exempt
Yeah.
from the fee because he has the discretion to exempt fee payments based on the national interest. He said he was already doing that with physicians. This exemption can apply to entire industries. It can apply to individual employers. It can apply to individuals who are on the H-1B themselves. It can be they can decide that an H-1B who travels and then re-enters the U.S., will they be hit with the fee? That's still to be decided. If somebody comes in as international students and get their H-1B in the United States, return home, come back on the H-1B, are they going to get the fee, or do they get exempt from it? Are they going to have a sort of fee that exists in name only, but everybody knows how to circumvent it, and then it's just kind of a non-entity or a more of a minor headache? I think that's all of those things are going to be how we think about this. How are they going to police other visa categories people might enter on? The proclamation talks about abusing the B1 visa when someone has an H-1B certification in place. The intent being that we want to clamp down on alternatives for people who enter on other visas and then come in on the H-1B. If they take the spirit of that seriously, they could clamp down on L visas as well, deny more L visas if they think it's going to be a loophole, maybe even deny more student visas, press them more on whether they intend to immigrate and get a new status while they're in the United States. So this could go a myriad of different ways, and depending on how that goes is going to be how litigation shapes up, though.
The lot of good points in there. I think the one that you made on will this fee exist in name only, but like everyone figures out basically the way to get exempt from it, immediately like took my brain to, again, back to my smokescreen theory, which is,
Yeah.
how much was this just to one, get the ramping political pressure off of the administration from their own side on the H-1B visa, which we again covered very closely here, from members of Congress, from talking heads on cable news, to individuals within the administration like Lutnick and JD Vance, talking about their concerns with the H-1B program. How much does this just sort of like move the issue off of the table so they can move on to other things, versus it be, something that is going to be seriously pursued to be implemented? on this podcast, because I think everyone always says, when it comes to immigration updates from the Trump administration, like, we'll just have to wait and see. So I try to avoid that on this podcast, but this is one where we really have no choice but to say we're just going to have to wait and see.
I guess maybe my response out of that is why do they care so much about the weighted lottery? Why is this such a key part of their agenda? Why would they try to smokescreen in favor of advancing this through? I guess that would be my my question regarding your smokescreens theory.
Again, I'm not saying it was like an intentional, like, coordinated choice by all aspects of the administration. I'm just saying there are individuals within the administration at lower levels with whom this weighted selection theory has been an initiative going back to the first Trump administration in a different form.
Mhm.
And they could have chosen any time to release the text of the rule and open up the public comment, but they just happened to
true.
choose a few days after this proclamation went out. So I just think it might have been a little more opportunistic, because everyone I was talking to in August about the weighted selection rule, and let's maybe talk about that next. I'll share my screen with it. We could talk through some of the core components. Was saying, look, this is going to be just like the first time around. Every government lawyer, I had folks tell me that every government lawyer I've ever talked to inside of DHS says that you can't do this. This is going to get litigated against. Litigators are going to win, and this will not be the reality of the lottery. I think first, like, I think most folks at this point have an understanding of what this rule does in terms of changing the current lottery to a wage-based preferential lottery, where people with a higher wage level category have a better chance of selection odds. It doesn't in theory eliminate folks who are on wage level 1 salaries, but in practice, I've sort of run through some of the simulations. It certainly could do that, depending on how individual employers respond if this rule goes through. But I think most people who are listening to the podcast know the ins and outs of this rule, or at least the broad ins and outs of it. So we don't need to go through that. But Sam, maybe talk about, because you've combed through this, or you've gone through this with a fine tooth comb. Talk about some of the things that stuck out to you when you reviewed this rule. Yeah, start there.
Yeah, I mean, the general criticism is of this rule is that it's not prioritizing absolute wages; it's prioritizing wage levels, and wage levels are relative to somebody's occupation, and they don't take into account, especially the way that this rule is treating wage levels. They don't take into account age or experience. And so what will end up happening is that an IT worker who is in their 40s, who has many years doing IT work, maybe it's true that they're paid a lot relative to other IT workers in their area. They may still be paid less than IT workers who are similar in their experience, right? And have the same sort of work experience, the same age. They may be paid less than their age cohorts, and they're certainly paid less than, the young AI researcher or the young electrical engineer in a big city. And so we're not getting absolute wages prioritized. We're getting experienced people in relatively low paying professions also prioritized, and people who might be being so. That's the first thing, right, to, I think, clarify here, is that it's not prioritizing absolute wages. It's prioritizing people who are well paid relative to their occupation and location. That
Right.
doesn't necessarily bring in some of the people who we would, colloquially call the best and brightest. It can bring in any random occupation, and any person who, it could bring in people who are paid $50,000 depending on their job and their location. So I think that's the first thing to clarify here. The second thing is it's unclear how sound the methodology is here as we look through this. I'm still combing through it, but there's already reason to be skeptical of the administration's estimated impact on this rule, because they're saying that civil engineers and architects are only level 1, only in the level 1 wage level category. And if you look at the USCIS data, you can either go to Bloomberg has FOIA'd a lot of the data for lottery entrants as well as IFP. They're finding plenty of civil engineers and architects who are at level 2, 3, and 4 wage levels. And so for them to say, yeah, that you have the graph there, to say that some of these occupations are entirely level 1 is not true. And so that gives, I think, a big reason to look at the rest of their analysis and see if there's anything else that needs to be corrected for before this rule goes into effect, or if it goes into effect and doesn't get litigated.
Yeah, one of the things that really stuck out to me when I was reviewing this is they use data, registration and selection data, and wage data from the fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2024 H-1B caps. So that omits fiscal year 2025 and 2026, the two most recent caps. For anyone who's in the industry, they'll know that like the H-1B cap changed significantly since 2023, 2024. The Biden administration put in new rules that changed how the registration system works, removed duplicate registrations. And again, I wonder if this analysis was new or if it was something that was sort of already in the works and was just sort of like put together quickly, because to not include the last two lotteries data in this in their analysis of the impact of this rule, again, it might just be necessary. It might be like a necessary sort of component of putting the rule together that I'm not aware of, and it's just, you know, a normal practice in the government. But to me, it omits a lot of important information, because what I've done is I've looked at the changes that the Biden administration made to the H-1B lottery registration system over the last 2 years, made it so that the Department of Labor's LCA data is almost a near one-to-one conduit to understand the prevailing wage breakdown of selectees in those last two lotteries, right? And maybe I'll just explain that quickly for non-practitioners who are listening. But in the past, when everyone would just submit a petition to be like a full petition prepared, ready to go to be selected in the H-1B lottery, you'd have a bunch of LCAs filed, and you would have no idea if those individual LCAs were tied to a specific H-1B cap petition that was ultimately selected. When they changed the process so that it was an electronic registration and selection happened before registration, selection happened after registration, then what you saw is that people would wait to file their LCAs until after H-1B petition was actually selected. And so you started to see, okay, there were 120,000 selections in the lottery this year for 85,000 total slots. Okay, like how many LCAs were there in the same time period? Oh, there was 119,000, right? It's not perfect, but you can go in and see, okay, how many of those LCAs were for prevailing wage level 1, prevailing wage level 2, prevailing wage level 3. And when I was looking at their analysis here and saying myself to do a deeper breakdown, like the numbers weren't like quite adding up to me. And I think Jeremy pointed this out in his piece as well. Maybe we can show that in a minute. But their USCIS's projections for how this, if the weighted rule went into effect, how it would change the makeup of selections based on prevailing wage, was totally undercounting the impact it would have on level 1 wages. And in terms of, there would be far fewer level one wage applicants selected than what they're projecting, and there'd be way more level 3 and level 4 app registrations that would be selected, because ultimately companies would be incentivized, like you mentioned before, to find a prevailing wage that is higher based off of a certain job type or job category or location in order to hit that 3 or 4 threshold. And effectively prevailing wage level 1 would be eliminated. And so a lot there, but basically like there's so much nuance to this rule. And I think, as you pointed out, in their methodology, they're missing certain historical components that you and Jeremy and others have called out. I think they're also, maybe it's intentional or maybe it's not, they're also underestimating the impact that this rule will have on the selection pool going forward.
Yeah, I think that you have to account for changes in behavior and the limited like there's only 4 wage levels.
Yeah.
And if we're at a point where we're seeing more people in wage level 4 and level 3, and the fact that you have completely different like wage ranges within these wage levels to begin with, you'll have a lot of bottom tier wage level 3 people and bottom tier wage level 4 people have 3 and 4 chances in the lottery, whereas the top tier wage level 3 and wage level 4 people are going to be disadvantaged by that as well. And so that's something to keep in mind here with this is that the administration does say that people will raise their wages in response to this rule so they can be more favorably selected in the lottery. That's not good though, because these wage levels are blunt instruments anyway. And also, as Jeremy and others have pointed out, there's going to be an incentive to smuggle people into different occupational codes so that they're being paid at higher wage levels. So they will try to be put into a lower paying occupation so that that their salary has more weight in the lottery selection. And so there's just a lot of ways to game this. I don't think it's a highlight that they're raising the wage level, or that that people will be raising wages to get wage level 3 and wage level 4, just because it undermines the intent of the rule itself, which is to prioritize higher salaries. If it was a salary ranked rule, then the highest salaries will be selected. Because it's a strange weighted thing based off of wage levels. You're going to have, like I said before, bottom tier wage level 3 have the same chance as top tier wage level 3. You'll have bottom tier wage level 4 have the same chance as top tier wage level 4. And effectively, you're giving these IT outsourcing companies, which are predominantly in wage level 2 and somewhat in wage level 3, the ability to plan and go up a level. And we might see these IT outsourcing companies more in wage level 3 territory, maybe even some in wage level 4 territory, depending on how they're able to maneuver this. So they've highlighted this they highlighted that people will raise the salary threshold, their salaries in the rule, but I don't think that they've done a thorough enough analysis on the negative impact of that as well.
Do you have a theory as to why the Trump administration didn't just introduce a rule that was would weight selections based off of actual salary? Do you think that there was like litigation concerns? Because in theory, based off of the argument they made for the need for this rule, that a rule that selected more favorably for applicants with a higher actual salary, not just a prevailing wage level, would achieve the same goal, likely even better than this rule, right? Why do you think they didn't go that route?
I mean, what I've been hearing is that they think this puts them in a stronger legal footing to maintain the lottery system.
Yeah.
They say in this rule they like this better because they like the weighted lottery better than a salary ranked wage level system, because the wage level 1 still has a chance of being selected, and we want everyone to still have a chance of being selected in this rule. I have not, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I have not seen any litigation stating that they would be in stronger footing with this lottery. That seems like it's more speculation. From my understanding, the rule was overturned for other reasons. They violated the APA.
Yeah. The 2020
Yeah,
version.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's 2020.
They got them on administrative causes, basically.
Yeah, not the actual substance of the rule.
Yeah.
So, there's some contradiction here. They say that there are some very high skilled wage level ones that should be selected and that deserve a shot at this. That speaks to the flaws of the wage level system to begin with, though. If we're having really high skilled, high earning people in wage level 1, why are we using the wage level system to begin with? There's no obligation with the H-1B lottery to even use the wage levels at all and incorporate the wage levels at all. So, I mean, you could do a lottery that doesn't have wage levels. You could do something else that weights salary and not wage levels. And so, I'm wondering if the administration will be open to those alternatives.
Yeah, and maybe next, just before we wrap up, we could talk about some of the DOL initiatives to maybe fill in some of those gaps on enforcing enforcing that certain wages be paid, and also raising those wage levels. Before we do that, I just want to point out, and I'll include something a little bit more robust in my newsletter. But for those of you who are watching, what I was talking about before, where USCIS sort of games out what the difference would be between the sort of average, annual normal lottery, the system as it exists now, where it's randomized, how different what the selection breakdown would be for applicants with different wage levels versus what those selections would look like, what that selection breakdown would look like under the weighted rule. And again, it shows like a halving of level 1 selections. Level 2 selections actually increase a little bit. Level 3 selections increase, by about 4,500 selections, and then level 4 increases by 3,000 or so selections as well. Sam, I'll share this with you when we do it, but I'm working with a former USCIS official who's since left the agency and is now a private citizen, but it was involved in some of the stuff behind the scenes on simulating out, okay, if this wage level rule goes into effect, what are the different ways that employers could respond in order to give themselves the best chance to get as many of their employees selected in this new weighted lottery as possible? And what would the overall registration pool then look like? In all of the most plausible scenarios, what's going to happen, and you sort of referenced how that this is going to happen, is there's going to be a far larger pool of level 4 and level 3 and even level 2, but mostly level 3 and level 4 registrations than there ever has been before. And because of the way this new weighted system would work, those folks would get selected at a far higher rate than what this sort of simulation from USCIS is showing. This is not. I don't think there's any world in which the weighted selection rule causes this particular outcome that I'm highlighting here. It will be far more skewed towards level 3 and level 4.
I agree.
Real quick, I just want to talk about DOL's Project Firewall, which I think was originally announced the same day as the $100,000 H-1B fee and the gold and platinum cards. Morgan Lewis, I think, did a really good summary on what we know so far about Project Firewall that I'll link in the description. I'll scroll down a little bit here to the part where I think is most interesting, right? So DOL in the announcement about Project Firewall essentially says that they're going to increase their scrutiny into specific employers that may not be in compliance within their individual H-1B programs. The Secretary of Labor will actually be more involved. DOL will be doing investigations, and there will be increased penalties for companies that are out of compliance. Morgan Lewis, again, does a good job here, sort of breaking down the different types of compliance that DOL will be looking at: wages, occupational classification, and wage level. So what we were just talking about with the weighted selection rule and prevailing wage levels and SOC codes, et cetera. Work site compliance is a really big one. And then path documentation is another one that I'll flag. Sam, how much do you know about this so far? This is actually, I should say this. I had caught wind that this was going to happen about 2 months ago. I didn't know that it would be announced. Yeah, I didn't know it would have a name, Project Firewall, but I did know, I did hear from a very reliable source that in the fall, DOL was going to be significantly ramping up employer audits for H-1B, LCA, perm, etc. What do you think led to this at this time, Sam?
I don't know. To be candid with you, I know that at least on paper, this was connected to the White House proclamation on H-1Bs. The DOL was instructed to do certain things to curb H-1B abuse, and so the impetus, at least on paper, sprang from that proclamation. I don't know what the impact of this is going to be. I don't know how extensive this is going to be. If they're going to be looking at IT outsourcing companies and people who are on work sites employed by these outsourcing companies and staffing firms, or if they're going to be looking at more employers than that. I will say, though, that it's very odd to call something that DOL already has the statutory authority to do Project Firewall. I mean, this is like they have the authority, and they've historically done this with like H-2A farm worker visas. See occupational classifications, do worksite visits. This is actually like what DOL is statutorily authorized to do. It's very weird and more legally ambiguous, in my opinion, that USCIS has been doing the worksite visits and using fee revenue to do worksite visits, and stuff like that when this is already DOL's role. So, I mean, on paper, this seems like this is probably a more faithful execution of the law. I mean, the reality is that we'll probably have FDNS and DOL both doing worksite visits and might be duplicative and confusing for people. I don't know what the agency coordination is going to look like on that with USCIS and DOL. But, on paper, though, this seems like this is within DOL's jurisdiction to do. And it's been a little bit surprising that FDNS, the fraud detection unit of USCIS, has been more the face of these worksite investigations and not DOL.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there is important, which is that USCIS being a fee-funded agency, its resources are far more expansive than what traditionally the FLC at DOL has had. I think it's now what's the Office of Immigration Policy now. Brad Bannis's litigation from a couple of years ago exposed sort of the very, very small number of employees focused on immigration applications at the Department of Labor, which has obviously contributed to a lot of the backlogs. And one wonders, okay, this is a big initiative, right? On paper, it's a really, really big initiative if the Department of Labor is going to start increasing the authority, like you said, that they've already had. They're going to start to execute on that authority at a far greater capacity, supposedly. Where are they going to get the resources to do that? That maybe is a good segue into the final topic here, which is your area of expertise far more than mine, Sam. Although I know you haven't dug into the specifics of this bill quite yet, but same timetable as all of the news that we've covered so far today. Senators Chuck Grassley and Dick Durbin introduced a bipartisan bill to reform the H-1B and L-1 visa programs. As part of that bill, they are going to the bill would place a fee on LCAs, and I haven't read the text of it, but I presume probably fees on other maybe perms, prevailing wage determinations, etc., in order to hire an additional 200 Department of Labor employees, which I think would, to a lot of immigration practitioners would be music to their ears, given the backlogs at DOL and what a bottleneck it is for the overall employment-based immigration process, very much unnecessarily. But in the context of everything else that's going on, Sam, where do you think this bill fits in?
I mean, this bill by Durbin and Grassley has been a perennial reintroduction bill for a very long time. That just happens to be more relevant now based off of what the Trump administration is doing, including, I don't know if if this fee to hire more DOL employees was in the original incarnation of this bill. The fact that it's here now when all this stuff is happening, though, is particularly relevant, and it seems like some stars are aligning here. The issue here is the the increase in the workload that this bill is going to require for DOL employees, that could be counterbalanced by the hundreds of the 200 DOL employees that would be hired as a result of that. So it could be we could be getting back to square one as far as processing delays, as well as more inconvenience for H-1Bs. This rule would effectively give people who are on non-immigrant visas the perm treatment that green card holders already have to some extent, where they're being they have to recruit domestically before and do an attestation
Yeah.
that that no American can do the job, and that's going to require additional work. So the thing that I'm wondering is why we're doing. There's a lot of H-1B bills that are coming about with the
Yeah.
this Durbin Grassley bill you're showing. Tom Cotton has a bill to eliminate the cap exempt H-1B. Nobody is doing a clean bill that ranks H-1Bs based off of salary that would give the administration explicit ability to reconstruct the H-1B lottery into a salary rank system. And that's where I think the demand is right now, really. If you want to eliminate all of these complex things that are within the H-1B program, a lot of things that employers are able to sort of use as a smokescreen to, attract and retain their foreign employees and not hire American employees. The way to do that is to just reward the people who are paying the most for the H-1Bs and not give employers more paperwork and procedures to fill out that are gameable. And so I think that this is a very interesting timing of its reintroduction. Maybe this bill is going to have more feet given the DOL's priorities. But the smart money is always that bills don't pass. And so
Yeah.
I'm still going to
You
be skeptical.
you preempted my next question. I was going to give you a layup, which is like, hey, Sam, how likely is it that this bill is going to become law? Because we could very confidently say virtually 0% chance on, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what side you're on.
Who
But
knows? Look, who knows? I mean, this bill has been laying out forever. The highest ranking people in both parties in the Judiciary Committee, which oversees immigration, is Dick Durbin and Chuck Grassley. They're the most senior members of that committee. I mean, it's not insignificant. And so I the smart money is on this is not going to pass, but like I'm also not going to affirmatively say the other way, right? Like it means something if the chief people on the immigration committee are introducing this bill, and if it's more politically relevant than it has been before, maybe this will have momentum.
That's what I was going to say. So the way I've been framing it to people who ask me is that there's still, if history, if you look at history as an example, very unlikely that any immigration bill passes through Congress, right? But if there was ever a time where H-1B reform or L-1 reform or high-skilled immigration reform could happen, it's like the next 9 months, right? That doesn't mean the likelihood's high. It just, in my opinion, the window creates a higher chance than there has been in quite a while. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. There's more political attention and more momentum on this issue. And because of that, and especially with like Durbin retiring too, I'm not going to sleep on this bill. So I think that we should be I'm going to be paying a very close attention to the developments of this bill.
You brought up a really good point on that, and we're not covering it today, but the other legislation that has been introduced by several senators. Also, there's legislation being introduced in the House, and a lot of it being like piecemeal, right? A lot of it being like focused on very specific aspects of some of these visa programs, as opposed to like reforming the entire visa program in a way that maybe there is some sort of consensus amongst Republicans who are aligned with the Trump administration on high-skilled immigration policy around something like a salary-based rule or some way to reform the H-1B in a way that they're that they've tried to do through the rule making process in the past, especially at the end of the first Trump administration.
Yeah. There are a lot of attempts to for people to plant their flag on this issue, eliminating the cap exempt H-1B, eliminating OPT has been a perennial thing that people wanted to do. Cotton also wanted to have OPT pay FICA taxes too, which again, does any bill pass? I mean, if that bill does pass, does OPT codified into law now, right? So that's like a there's a lot of attention paid to these once obscure programs now. They're under the microscope, but the intention is still about scoring political points. We're not really seeing the same intensity on the other side of from Democrats or any bipartisan bills in the other direction to strengthen immigration, to expand immigration, to reward more high skilled people. We're seeing, despite more Americans supporting immigration during the Trump administration, we're seeing a political backlash amongst our elected officials that doesn't quite comport with what public opinion is. And I think that's a very interesting development. And I think it remains to be seen on what's going to be done. But I think there will be attempts that are going to be seemingly realistic to try to change the program.
Yeah, well said. Final thought from me on that, because what you just said sparked this. It is fascinating, and it has been fascinating to me over the past. It got publicity with the Elon Bannon debates over Christmas of last year on the H-1B originally, but over the past 9, 10, 12 months, the amount of times high level Republican officials have talked about the H-1B program has been very interesting to me. Just the level of attention that it's getting in comparison to the interest you hear from Democrats, which is like near zero. I mean, you know better than me, but like other than Dick Durbin, Bernie Sanders, and Ro Khanna, I haven't heard much about the H-1B program or any high skilled immigration program from Democrats for the most part. And I think it's interesting that the right is seemingly staking its claim to like own that issue as it comes into more public attention than it ever has been before.
Yeah, definitely. I also think that it's telling that that's the case. I think that Democrats, they have a lot on their plate right now. The Trump deportations are working in their favor because of the visceral how viscerally extreme it looks, and so they're paying attention to that. Republicans are looking more, I think, on these obscure visa programs because it's a way to talk about immigration
Mm.
without defending something that's very viscerally polarizing. And so I think that explains at least this recent shift. And also, when you say we support the H-1B visa program, that doesn't really garner like immediate like support. Like, yeah, we like it's an alphabet soup program. It makes it with a name like H-1B, O1, anything else. It's easier to demonize something that's boring sounding than it is to prop it up and celebrate it. So whenever the H-1B is mentioned by Democrats, it's, like the America's Children Act, like Deborah Ross and Alex Padilla, Rand Paul, Miller Meeks. It's about giving opportunity to high skilled individuals, and it's not about the actual visa program. It's about
Right.
how we treat the people who are already here with the visa program. And so, I don't think it fits into the narrative of like attracting the best and brightest to just like talk about the program, the flaws and all. And so I think that that's why it's not as mentioned as much.
This is why I loved bringing you onto the podcast, is to fill me in on sort of like the on the ground DC political workings of this stuff, because it's there's too much to follow in immigration, and that's one area that I don't spend very, very much time on. So, but I'm lucky to talk with folks like you and learn about it. Sam, you've been very generous with your time. We're over an hour now. Before we go, is there, with all of this high profile immigration news, is there anything that you've been working on or tracking that maybe is under the radar, isn't in the news, or have you been laser focused on some of the big stories some of the big initiatives that we've talked about today?
I would just say that I think we've covered everything that I'm focused on. For folks who are interested in learning more about our work from the Economic Innovation Group, the piece that you plugged, our explainer on the H-1B fee rule, it's unique in that it not only focuses on the fee rule itself, but also the economic justifications behind the rule. My colleague Connor O'Brien has done a lot of great work on the domestic STEM market, the labor market for STEM for people who are educated in STEM, showing that there's no surplus of STEM workers, which is why the Trump administration justified the rule in the first place.
Mhm.
People who study STEM and they're in computer science and all of these other occupations, they have an earnings premium over the people who are not educated in STEM. Even if those computer science or mathematics graduates aren't even working in STEM fields and they're working in non-STEM fields, they still have a tremendous earning advantage over their colleagues who did not study STEM. And sometimes they have an earnings advantage over people who are in a STEM field. So it's still worth it to get a STEM degree for people. We need more STEM educated people, not less. This is a recipe for self-destruction. If our mentality is that we have too many STEM graduates, that's not the way we should be doing things. So I just encourage your listeners to check out our piece on the H-1B fee rule, and especially that point about the STEM workforce in the United States, because I don't think that's going to be stressed enough. I think it's one of the most toxic things that is being circulated now, that we have a surplus of STEM graduates is just not true.
Yeah. Well, we'll link to that article. We'll also link to Sam's Twitter, X, LinkedIn, all that stuff, so folks can follow your work as you release new stuff as well. So, Sam, I really appreciate you coming on, joining me this afternoon, recapping what was a whirlwind of the last 2 weeks of immigration news. Thanks for being my first repeat guest too, and you'll have to come on for a third time, I hope, as well, in a couple of months.
It's an honor. Great talking with you, Finn.
Thanks, Sam.